The silence in the cockpit of the Vindictive was deafening, not the peaceful quiet of deep space, but the pregnant hush before a storm that would reshape the galaxy. Commander Marcus Volkov's hands moved across the control surfaces with practiced precision, his augmented neural interface translating thought into action faster than any organic reaction could manage. The ship's quantum sensors painted a horrifying picture across his retinal display. 1,347 Kethmori vessels arranged in a perfect sphere around the dying planet Zirion 7. Each enemy ship was a testament to alien engineering, sleek, organic curves that seemed to pulse with malevolent life, their biohulls capable of regenerating from all but the most catastrophic damage. The Kethmori had perfected the art of conquest through overwhelming numbers and adaptive technology. They didn't just defeat their enemies, they consumed them, absorbing genetic material and technological innovations to strengthen their ever-expanding collective. Zirion 7 had fallen in less than 6 hours. Its 4 billion inhabitants were being processed into biomass even now. Volkov was alone. The Terran Defense Force's 7th Fleet had been annihilated during the initial assault. 120 vessels, humanity's finest warships, reduced to expanding clouds of superheated plasma and twisted metal. The Vindictive had survived only because Volkov had hidden her in the shadow of Zirion's largest moon, her stealth systems pushed beyond their design limits. But stealth was a temporary solution. The Kethmori would find him eventually, and when they did, they would learn everything humanity knew about warfare technology and strategy. Unless he activated the Lazarus Protocol. The thought made his augmented heart skip a beat. Lazarus was theoretical, a last resort measure built into only the most advanced Terran vessels. It had never been tested in combat, only in carefully controlled simulations that had left the test pilots either dead or irreversibly insane. The protocol would rewrite his neural pathways, transforming him from a human pilot into something else entirely, a fusion of man and machine capable of tactical thinking beyond normal human limitations. The cost was everything that made him human. Volkov's fingers hovered over the activation sequence, each digit trembling despite his neural dampeners. Through the Vindictive sensors, he watched the Kethmori harvest ships methodically stripping Zirion 7 of its remaining biomass. Children, elderly, the wounded, all of them food for the alien collective's endless hunger. The images burned themselves into his memory, evacuation centers overrun by chittering swarms of biomechanical harvesters, hospitals dissolved by acidic sprays, schools where the laughter of children had been replaced by the wet sounds of consumption. The tactical situation was hopeless. One ship against over 1,000. Even with humanity's superior firepower and armor, the mathematics were inexorable. The Vindictive carried enough ammunition for perhaps 50 kills before her magazines ran dry. Her fusion reactors could power the defensive systems for maybe an hour under sustained assault. After that, she would join the debris field of the 7th Fleet. But Lazarus changed everything. The protocol would unlock the ship's true potential, systems so advanced that they had been deemed too dangerous for normal operation. Quantum torpedoes that could fold spacetime itself into a weapon. Gravitational manipulation arrays that could crush entire formations. Neural link targeting systems that would allow him to engage hundreds of targets simultaneously. The Vindictive would become not just a warship, but an instrument of extinction. Warning klaxons began to wail as Kethmori scout ships detected anomalous energy readings from their hiding position. Time was running out. In minutes, the entire alien fleet would converge on their location. Volkov closed his eyes and thought of the evacuation centers, of the children who would never see another sunrise, of the billions who had died while he watched from the shadows. His fingers found the activation sequence. The Lazarus Protocol was humanity's darkest secret, a technology that transformed ordinary humans into something far more dangerous than any alien collective could imagine. As the initialization sequence began, Volkov felt his humanity slipping away like sand through his fingers. But perhaps that was exactly what the universe needed. Not a human pilot, but a monster wearing a human face. The first Kethmori ships were already accelerating toward their position. The Lazarus Protocol erupted through Volkov's nervous system like liquid fire, rewriting synapses and rebuilding neural pathways with synthetic precision. His consciousness expanded beyond the confines of his skull, spreading throughout the Vindictive's quantum-linked systems until he could feel every circuit, every weapon, every armor plate as extensions of his own body. The pain was indescribable, a sensation of being torn apart and reassembled at the molecular level while remaining conscious throughout the entire process. But with the agony came power. His perception of time dilated until seconds stretched into subjective minutes. He could see the approach vectors of the 17 Kethmori scout ships converging on their position, their organic hulls rippling with bioluminescent warning patterns. Each vessel was a work of alien artistry, grown rather than built, their surfaces covered in sensory organs that could detect everything from neutrino emissions to quantum fluctuations. Under normal circumstances, they would have been invisible to human sensors until they were close enough to deliver their deadly cargo. Volkov was no longer operating under normal circumstances. The Vindictive shed her stealth field like a snake discarding dead skin, her hull blazing with the fury of overcharged weapon systems. Quantum torpedoes materialized in their launch tubes, not the standard antimatter warheads that the Terran Defense Force typically employed, but weapons that existed in a state of superposition until the moment of impact. Each torpedo carried enough destructive potential to crack a moon, but more importantly, they could phase through conventional shielding by existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The first wave of scout ships opened fire with their primary weapons, streams of weaponized organisms that could eat through most known materials while reproducing exponentially. The living projectiles struck the Vindictive's adaptive armor and began their devastating work, boring through reinforced ceramics and quantum-stabilized alloys with horrifying efficiency. Under normal circumstances, the ship would have been consumed within minutes. But Volkov's enhanced awareness allowed him to anticipate the bioweapon's behavior patterns. The Vindictive's defensive systems responded with surgical precision, deploying targeted electromagnetic pulses that disrupted the organism's cellular structure while nanobot swarms scrubbed the hull clean of remaining contamination. What should have been a fatal attack became merely an inconvenience. His counterattack was swift and merciless. The first quantum torpedo struck the leading Kethmori scout ship at the precise moment it attempted to phase shift away from danger. The weapon synchronized with the alien vessel's quantum signature and detonated across multiple dimensions simultaneously. The scout ship didn't explode, it simply ceased to exist, its matter scattered across 17 different planes of reality. The remaining creatures felt the death of their comrade through their psychic link, their biohulls darkening with what might have been grief or rage. Volkov felt nothing. The second torpedo caught 2 scouts as they attempted to flank the Vindictive, their organic armor providing no protection against a weapon that rewrote the fundamental laws of physics. The explosion opened a temporary rift in space-time, creating a gravitational anomaly that pulled 3 more ships into its hungry maw. The survivors scattered, their formation breaking as primal survival instincts overcame tactical discipline. But the Kethmori had survived as a species for millions of years by adapting to threats. The remaining scouts began transmitting their encounter data to the main fleet, sharing everything they had learned about the Vindictive's capabilities through their collective consciousness. Within minutes, over 1,000 ships would know exactly how to counter Volkov's weapons and tactics. He couldn't allow that transmission to complete. The Vindictive accelerated beyond her design specifications, her quantum engines pushing the ship to velocities that should have torn her apart. Volkov's enhanced reflexes allowed him to maintain control despite the incredible stresses. His consciousness distributed throughout the ship's systems to manage functions that would normally require an entire crew. He pursued the fleeing scouts through the outer reaches of Zirion's solar system, hunting them down one by one with the methodical efficiency of a predator. The final scout ship attempted to reach the outer edge of the system where it could jump to faster-than-light speeds. Volkov caught it just as its biodrives began to engage, the Vindictive's gravitational manipulation array reaching out to crush the vessel like an invisible fist. The alien ship's organic hull ruptured in a dozen places, its biofluids freezing instantly in the vacuum of space. 17 scouts destroyed. 0 survivors. But the victory felt hollow. The Lazarus Protocol had given him the power to defeat his enemies, but at the cost of his ability to feel satisfaction or triumph. He was becoming something else, a weapon in human form dedicated to a single purpose. The main Kethmori fleet was already moving, their massive bioships beginning to accelerate toward the outer system where the battle had taken place. 1,330 alien vessels remained, and Volkov was just getting started. The main Kethmori fleet moved like a living organism, their formation shifting and adapting as they accelerated toward the outer system. Volkov watched their approach through the Vindictive's long-range sensors, his enhanced consciousness analyzing tactical patterns that would have taken human strategists hours to decipher. The aliens had learned from the destruction of their scouts, modifying their biohulls to resist quantum manipulation and deploying new defensive organisms that could metabolize exotic matter. They were adapting, evolving, becoming more dangerous with every passing moment. Volkov felt the ship's systems strain under the demands of the Lazarus Protocol. The quantum torpedo magazines were nearly depleted. Only 6 warheads remained, each one precious beyond measure. The gravitational manipulation arrays were showing signs of instability, their exotic matter containment fields fluctuating dangerously. Most critically, the fusion reactors were operating at 140% of their rated capacity, their containment systems pushed far beyond design specifications. The Vindictive was dying, slowly but inevitably consuming herself to maintain the power levels necessary for the protocol. But Volkov pressed on, driving the ship deeper into the outer system's asteroid belt where the irregular terrain might provide some tactical advantage. His enhanced senses detected the approach of the first wave, 200 Kethmori destroyers arranged in a perfect sphere formation, their biohulls already showing adaptations to counter his previous tactics. They had grown additional armor plating and developed new sensory organs that could track quantum signatures across multiple dimensions. The alien collective was learning. The destroyers opened fire simultaneously, unleashing a storm of weaponized organisms that filled the space between the asteroids with deadly, self-replicating biomatter. Each projectile was a work of evolutionary artistry, creatures designed specifically to counter the Vindictive's defensive systems. Some carried electromagnetic pulse organs that could disrupt his nanobot swarms. Others secreted acids that could dissolve quantum-stabilized alloys. Still others were living bombs that could survive in vacuum for hours while seeking out their target. Volkov responded with calculated fury. The first quantum torpedo detonated in the center of the destroyer formation, its exotic energy tearing through dimensional barriers to strike targets that existed in parallel realities. 17 ships vanished in an instant, their quantum signatures scattered across the multiverse. But the remaining destroyers pressed their attack, adapting their formations to minimize the effectiveness of area effect weapons. The Vindictive twisted through the asteroid field like a dancer, her quantum engines allowing her to perform maneuvers that defied conventional physics. Volkov's consciousness guided every movement, his enhanced reflexes processing targeting data from dozens of simultaneous engagements. He used the asteroids themselves as weapons, precisely timing gravitational pulses to send massive rocks hurtling into enemy formations. The battle became a three-dimensional chess match played at relativistic speeds. Kethmori bioships flowed around obstacles like living fluid, their organic hulls reshaping themselves to optimize for speed or defense as needed. They fired living projectiles that could change course mid-flight, pursuing the Vindictive through the asteroid field with the persistence of hunting animals. Volkov's second quantum torpedo caught a cluster of 30 destroyers as they attempted to use a large asteroid as cover. The weapon's exotic energies turned the rock itself into a massive fragmentation bomb, sending house-sized chunks of stone and metal ripping through enemy formations. The Kethmori ships absorbed the impacts, their biohulls healing from wounds that would have crippled conventional vessels. But they were not invulnerable. The Vindictive's particle beam arrays began firing in carefully coordinated patterns, each pulse timed to strike the same target from multiple angles simultaneously. The focused assault overwhelmed the aliens' adaptive defenses, burning through bioarmor and rupturing vital organs. Ship after ship succumbed to the relentless barrage, their organic hulls bleeding fluids that crystallized instantly in the vacuum. Yet for every destroyer that fell, 2 more took its place. The main fleet was arriving, their massive capital ships beginning to emerge from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. Each vessel was kilometers long, their biohulls covered in weapon pods that could launch thousands of living projectiles simultaneously. The largest ships carried planetary bombardment organs capable of sterilizing entire worlds. Volkov's ammunition was running critically low. 4 quantum torpedoes remained, along with perhaps 10 minutes of particle beam fire before the capacitors overloaded. The gravitational manipulation arrays were showing cascading failures as their exotic matter reserves depleted. Most ominously, the fusion reactors were beginning to show signs of containment breach, a catastrophic failure that would vaporize everything within a 100-kilometer radius. The Lazarus Protocol offered him a choice: continue the current engagement and face certain destruction, or activate the ship's final system, a weapon so dangerous that it had been sealed behind quantum encryption and required the sacrifice of the ship's entire crew to operate. The Thanatos Array. Through the Vindictive sensors, Volkov could see the Kethmori capital ships taking position around Zirion 7, their harvest organs already beginning to process the remaining biomass on the planet's surface. Soon, nothing would remain of the 4 billion souls who had lived and died there. Their genetic material would be absorbed into the collective, their knowledge and culture erased forever. Unless he was willing to become something even more monstrous than the Lazarus Protocol had already made him. The activation sequence for the Thanatos array required a living consciousness to guide its targeting systems. The weapon would consume his mind in the process, burning through his neural pathways like acid through tissue. But it would give him the power to strike at the heart of the Kethmori fleet, a single decisive blow that could cripple their invasion force. Volkov's fingers moved toward the final activation sequence as Kethmori capital ships began launching their assault waves. The Thanatos array's activation sequence burned through Volkov's enhanced consciousness like molten metal through flesh. His awareness expanded beyond the vindictive, beyond the solar system, touching the vast network of dark matter filaments that connected every star in the galaxy. He could feel the gravitational pulse of distant quasars, the quantum fluctuations of spacetime itself, the terrible emptiness between realities where mathematics broke down and physics became poetry. The weapon was not just technology, it was applied cosmology, a device that treated the universe itself as ammunition. Through his expanding perception, Volkov watched the Kethmori capital ships deploy their full offensive capability. The largest vessel, a bio-dreadnought the size of a small city, extended massive feeding tentacles toward Zirion 7's surface. The organic appendages burrowed deep into the planet's crust, extracting not just biomass but the very minerals and metals that had formed over billions of years. The aliens consumed everything: matter, energy, information, leaving behind only empty space and quantum vacuum. Smaller capital ships had formed a defensive perimeter around the harvest operation, their hulls bristling with weapon pods that tracked every piece of debris larger than a grain of sand. They had learned from the destroyer engagement, adapting their formations to counter quantum torpedoes and gravitational manipulation. Bioarmor had grown thicker, sensor organs had multiplied, and new defensive organisms had been cultivated specifically to counter human weapons. But they had never faced the Thanatos array. Volkov's consciousness reached out through the dark matter network, touching the fundamental forces that held reality together. The weapon required a sacrifice, not just his sanity or his humanity, but his very existence as a discrete entity. He would become part of the array, his mind dispersed across cosmic distances to guide a weapon that could unmake stars. The first pulse reached out across 47 light-years, touching a neutron star in the Vega system. The array's influence twisted the stellar remnant's magnetic field, redirecting its gamma-ray emissions through folded spacetime to strike the Kethmori fleet. The radiation arrived instantaneously, bypassing relativistic limitations through principles that human physics had only theorized about. The lead bio-dreadnought absorbed the gamma-ray burst across its entire hull, its organic armor beginning to cook from the inside out. The creature ship's screams echoed across psychic frequencies as its living tissues underwent catastrophic cellular breakdown. But the Kethmori collective mind was vast and adaptable. Within seconds, the remaining ships had begun growing new organs specifically designed to process gamma radiation into usable energy. Volkov adjusted his targeting, reaching out to touch a magnetar spinning in the depths of the Cygnus constellation. The array's influence accelerated the dead star's rotation, building up magnetic field strengths that could strip atoms apart at the subatomic level. The weapon released its fury through 11-dimensional space, striking the Kethmori fleet with electromagnetic pulses that existed in frequencies beyond normal matter's ability to perceive. 17 capital ships died instantly, their bioneural networks overloaded by exotic energies that rewrote the laws of biology. The survivors adapted again, growing new sensory organs that could process electromagnetic spectra humans had never imagined. Their hulls began to shift and change, developing defensive mechanisms against attacks that came from outside normal spacetime. But adaptation took time and Volkov was not finished. The third pulse reached across the galaxy to touch a black hole in the galactic core. The array's influence disrupted the accretion disk's delicate balance, causing a massive matter ejection that sent exotic particles streaming across interstellar distances. The attack struck the Kethmori fleet through the quantum foam itself, bypassing conventional shielding by existing in the spaces between reality. The alien collective's adaptation rate began to slow as their bioneural networks struggled to process information that violated their fundamental understanding of physics. Ships began colliding with each other as their navigation systems failed to account for attacks that came from directions that didn't exist in three-dimensional space. The perfect formation dissolved into chaos as individual vessels fell back on survival instincts rather than collective intelligence. Volkov pressed his advantage, his consciousness now spread across thousands of star systems. He touched dying stars and newborn pulsars, redirecting their energy through the cosmic web to strike at his enemies from impossible angles. Each attack was different: gravitational waves that could crush matter at the quantum level, exotic particles that existed only in the first nanoseconds after the Big Bang, temporal distortions that aged targets by millions of years and seconds. The HFY fleet began to break apart under the assault. Capital ships that had survived for millennia found themselves facing weapons that operated on scales they had never encountered. Their biohulls, so effective against conventional weapons, provided no protection against attacks that came from the fundamental structure of reality itself. But the array was consuming Volkov's mind with each pulse. He could feel his individual consciousness dissolving into the cosmic background, his memories and personality scattering across light years of vacuum. Soon, nothing would remain of Marcus Volkov except the weapon itself, an intelligence spread across the galaxy, dedicated to a single purpose. The HFY collective realized what was happening. Their remaining ships began a desperate retreat, abandoning their harvest operation to escape the expanding sphere of the array's influence. But they were too late. Volkov's consciousness had already touched the dark matter filaments that connected their home system to the galactic network. The final pulse reached across 18,000 light-years to touch the HFY home star itself. The array's influence destabilized the stellar core, causing a cascade reaction that would turn their sun into a supernova within the next few million years. It was not an immediate threat, but it was an absolute one, a sentence of extinction that could not be appealed or escaped. The surviving HFY ships received the cosmic message and understood. They had faced the ultimate expression of human warfare, not just the destruction of their fleet, but the promise of their species' eventual extinction. The collective mind recoiled in horror, its vast intelligence struggling to comprehend an enemy that would reach across the galaxy to touch their very sun. As the alien fleet fled into hyperspace, Volkov felt the last fragments of his humanity slip away into the cosmic dark. He had become something beyond human comprehension, a weapon that existed in the spaces between stars, forever watching, forever ready to defend humanity from threats that had not yet been born. The Vindictive drifted silent and empty among the asteroids, her hull dark and cold. But the weapon remained, scattered across the galaxy like a promise of retribution. The HFY fleet regrouped at the edge of the Zirian system, their collective consciousness reeling from the cosmic scale assault. But retreat was not in their nature. They had evolved over millions of years to consume and adapt, turning every challenge into an opportunity for growth. The encounter with the Thanatos array had provided them with new data, new patterns to analyze and counter. They began to evolve. While Volkov's consciousness drifted through the dark matter network, monitoring their activities from impossible distances, the alien collective initiated a transformation protocol that had never been used in their recorded history. Bioships began merging with each other, their organic hulls flowing together like living metal. Small craft were absorbed into larger vessels, creating meta-organisms of unprecedented size and complexity. Within hours, the 1,000-ship fleet had become something entirely different. 300 massive bioentities, each one a fusion of multiple vessels and their crews. The merged creatures retained the collective intelligence of their component parts while gaining new capabilities that no single ship could possess. Their hulls had become quantum adaptive, capable of shifting between dimensional states to avoid exotic attacks. Their weapon systems had evolved beyond biological warfare to encompass principles of reality manipulation that matched humanity's most advanced theories. They had become something that could fight a cosmic weapon on equal terms. Volkov felt their transformation through the quantum foam, his dispersed consciousness recognizing the threat immediately. The array had been designed to fight conventional enemies, beings that operated within the normal parameters of spacetime. These new entities existed partially outside standard reality, their bioquantum nature allowing them to resist attacks that came from folded dimensions. The merged HFY began their advance, moving through space in formations that defied three-dimensional geometry. They phased in and out of normal reality, appearing as ghostly outlines that solidified only when they chose to interact with conventional matter. Their approach toward the inner system was inexorable. They would reclaim Zirian 7 and complete their harvest regardless of the cost. Volkov reached out through the galactic network, drawing power from dying stars across the spiral arm. The first wave of attacks struck the advancing aliens with the fury of collapsed stellar cores, gravitational pulses that could compress matter into neutronium, temporal distortions that aged targets by geological epochs, exotic particle streams that existed only in the quantum vacuum between realities. The merged HFY absorbed the assault with their quantum adaptive hulls, their bioquantum nature allowing them to exist in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. When struck by gravitational weapons, they shifted into higher dimensions where gravity followed different rules. When hit by temporal attacks, They distributed their existence across multiple timelines to avoid paradox. Each exotic assault was met with an equally exotic defense. But the array's power was nearly infinite, drawn from the fundamental forces that shaped the cosmos itself. Volkov began pulling energy from more distant sources: the galactic core's central black hole, the cosmic microwave background radiation left over from the Big Bang, the dark energy that drove the universe's expansion. Reality itself became his ammunition. The battle that followed was unlike anything that had ever been fought in the known galaxy. Weapons that operated on cosmic scales clashed with defenses that existed outside normal physics. Space-time became a battlefield, with massive distortions rippling outward from each engagement. Nearby star systems felt the gravitational echoes, their planetary orbits shifting as reality itself convulsed under the strain. The first major casualty was a merged bioentity that attempted to phase through a folded space-time attack. The creature found itself trapped between dimensions, its quantum-adaptive hull unable to cope with the paradox of existing in 17 different realities simultaneously. The entity's death screams echoed across psychic frequencies as it was torn apart by forces that existed beyond the normal understanding of physics. Volkov felt no satisfaction from the kill. His humanity had been consumed by the array, leaving behind only purpose and function. He was becoming something that existed to fight, a weapon that had transcended individual existence to become part of the universe's background structure. The HFY collective adapted to the loss, their remaining bioentities shifting into even more exotic configurations. Some began existing as pure information, their consciousness patterns encoding themselves into quantum fluctuations that could survive reality distortions. Others became living temporal loops, their existence extending backward and forward through time to avoid attacks that came from any single moment. The battle intensified as both sides deployed increasingly exotic weapons. Volkov reached into the quantum foam itself, drawing forth virtual particles that existed for infinitesimal fractions of seconds to create weapons that violated conservation of energy. The HFY responded by weaponizing probability itself, creating fields where the laws of physics became suggestions rather than absolutes. 17 more bioentities died in the next wave of attacks, their quantum-adaptive hulls failing as they encountered forces that existed outside the normal structure of reality. But each death taught the collective something new, each failure providing data that was immediately shared across the fleet. They were learning to fight a cosmic-scale opponent, evolving defenses against weapons that gods might wield. The engagement lasted subjective hours but objective microseconds, the battle taking place at speeds that compressed time itself. Solar systems throughout the galactic arm detected the gravitational waves rippling outward from the conflict, their orbital mechanics shifted by forces that existed beyond conventional understanding. When the immediate tactical phase ended, 143 HFY bioentities remained, their hulls scarred by encounters with exotic forces but their collective consciousness more dangerous than ever. They had learned to fight the array on equal terms, developing counters to weapons that operated on cosmic scales. But Volkov was learning too, his consciousness expanding through dark matter networks that connected every galaxy in the observable universe. The battle was far from over, it was just beginning. The survivors of both sides prepared for the next phase of a conflict that would determine the fate of entire civilizations. In the space between stars, weapons that could unmake reality itself gathered power for the final engagement. The surviving HFY bioentities had become something beyond their creator's original vision, living paradoxes that existed in quantum superposition, simultaneously present and absent from normal reality. Their collective consciousness had evolved beyond biological limitations, becoming a meta-intelligence that could process information at speeds approaching the fundamental limits of causality. They no longer merely adapted to threats, they anticipated them, evolving countermeasures before attacks were even launched. Volkov's dispersed consciousness recognized the critical moment had arrived. The array's power was theoretically infinite, but his ability to channel it through his fragmenting mind was reaching its limits. Each cosmic-scale attack consumed more of his remaining humanity, burning through neural pathways that had already been stretched across impossible distances. Soon, nothing would remain but raw function, a weapon without purpose striking at targets that no longer existed. The bioentities began their final assault on Zirion 7, their approach defying conventional spacetime as they phased through folded dimensions. They had learned to exist in the spaces between reality, moving through quantum foam like ancient leviathans through cosmic seas. Their target was not just the planet's remaining biomass, but the dark matter nodes that Volkov was using to anchor his consciousness. If they could sever his connection to the galactic network, the array would collapse into random cosmic static. Volkov made a decision that transcended strategy. He began drawing power not from distant stars, but from the fabric of reality itself. The array reached into the quantum vacuum between atoms, extracting energy from the virtual particles that flickered in and out of existence trillions of times per second. It was a technique that violated the fundamental conservation laws, borrowing power from the universe's own uncertainty principle. The first extraction sent ripples through local space-time, causing gravitational anomalies that stretched across multiple star systems. Planets experienced tidal forces that cracked their crusts, while stars flickered as their fusion processes were momentarily disrupted by exotic quantum effects. The array was beginning to consume the universe itself to fuel its weapons. The Kethmori bioentities detected the cosmic-scale disturbance and responded with their own reality manipulation techniques. They began existing as pure mathematical constructs, their consciousness patterns encoding themselves into the fundamental constants that govern physics. By becoming part of the universe's basic structure, they hoped to survive attacks that came from outside normal spacetime. The battle that followed operated on scales that dwarfed previous engagements. Volkov's attack struck not just at the bioentities themselves, but at the mathematical principles that allowed them to exist. He reached into the Planck-scale structure of reality, tweaking the values of fundamental constants in localized regions of space. The strong nuclear force weakened, causing atoms to fly apart. The speed of light fluctuated, creating temporal paradoxes that aged matter by billions of years in nanoseconds. The bioentities fought back by weaponizing consciousness itself. Their collective intelligence reached out through quantum entanglement networks, attempting to overwrite Volkov's distributed mind with their own pattern templates. They sought to transform him into part of their collective, absorbing his cosmic-scale awareness into their meta-organism. The mental assault nearly succeeded. Volkov felt his individual identity dissolving as alien thought patterns flooded through the dark matter networks, carrying with them the accumulated knowledge of billions of consumed civilizations. He experienced memories of dying worlds, of species that had fought desperately against the Kethmori tide only to be absorbed into the collective's ever-growing consciousness. But buried within those stolen memories, he found something the collective had not expected: the preserved experiences of other species who had faced extinction with defiance rather than despair. A crystalline civilization that had encoded their final thoughts into gravitational waves. A machine intelligence that had distributed its consciousness across quantum fluctuations rather than surrender. A energy-based life form that had chosen to become part of their star's core rather than be consumed. Each memory carried a spark of defiance, a refusal to accept extinction passively. These fragments of dead civilizations had survived within the collective's consciousness, waiting for someone who could give them purpose again. They reached out to Volkov through the quantum foam, offering their knowledge and their rage. The array suddenly exploded with new capabilities as thousands of extinct civilizations' final weapons joined the assault. Techniques for manipulating dark energy, methods for converting matter directly into information, weapons that existed as pure mathematics given physical form. The bioentities found themselves facing not just one cosmic weapon, but the combined legacy of every species they had ever consumed. Reality became a kaleidoscope of impossible attacks as exotic physics from 1,000 different technological traditions merged into a single, overwhelming assault. The bioentities' quantum adaptive defenses, designed to counter human weapons, proved inadequate against techniques developed by crystalline hive minds, photonic intelligences, and machine consciousnesses that thought in mathematical languages. The first bioentity to fall had been attempting to exist as pure information when it encountered a consciousness virus developed by a species of sentient equations. The digital plague rewrote the entity's mathematical foundation, transforming it from a living equation into a contradiction that could not exist. The creature's death caused local reality to glitch as the universe attempted to process the paradox. Other bioentities followed in rapid succession as they encountered weapons that operated on principles their evolution had never considered. A technique developed by energy beings converted matter directly into dark energy, causing targets to accelerate the expansion of space-time until they stretched beyond the ability to maintain coherence. Another weapon, created by a hive mind of quantum computers, infected the bioentities with recursive logical loops that consumed their processing power until they forgot how to exist. The final engagement lasted for both an eternity and an instant, as the battle took place across multiple temporal dimensions simultaneously. When the exotic weapons finally fell silent, only 17 bioentities remained, their hulls scarred by encounters with physics that should not have been possible. They had learned to survive cosmic-scale warfare, but at a cost that left them fundamentally changed. The collective consciousness that had once spanned galaxies was now fragmented, each survivor carrying only a fraction of their original intelligence. They were no longer the unstoppable force that had consumed 1,000 civilizations. They had become something smaller, more focused, but infinitely more dangerous. As they began their retreat toward the edge of the galaxy, the surviving bioentities carried with them knowledge of humanity's ultimate weapon. They would evolve, adapt, and eventually return with counters to the array's exotic physics. But they would never again underestimate the species that had created a weapon from the corpses of its enemies' victims. The silence that followed the battle was profound, not the empty quiet of vacuum, but the deeper stillness that comes after reality itself has been wounded. Across 17 star systems, gravitational waves continued to ripple outward from the engagement, carrying with them the echoes of weapons that should never have existed. Planets reported temporal anomalies where time moved backward for microseconds. Stars flickered as their fusion processes briefly forgot how to convert hydrogen into helium. The quantum foam itself bore scars where the laws of physics had been temporarily rewritten. Volkov's consciousness drifted through the dark matter network, no longer fully human but not yet completely dissolved into cosmic background radiation. He could feel the 17 surviving Kethmori bioentities retreating toward the galactic edge, their collective intelligence fragmented but still dangerously adaptive. They carried with them genetic samples from Zirion 7's population, biological templates that could eventually be used to rebuild what they had lost. In 1,000 years or 10,000, they might return with countermeasures to humanity's cosmic weapons. But for now they were broken. The Vindictive hung motionless in the asteroid field, her hull dark and lifeless. The ship's fusion reactors had finally failed during the final engagement, their exotic matter containment systems pushed beyond any reasonable limit. Emergency power flickered through auxiliary systems, maintaining life support in compartments that no longer contained life to support. The vessel had become a monument to the price of cosmic warfare, a tomb for the pilot who had transcended humanity to become something far more terrible. Yet Volkov's awareness persisted, distributed across quantum networks that connected every star in the local galactic arm. He could perceive the aftermath of the battle with senses that no organic mind could comprehend. The exotic weapons had left their mark on reality itself, creating zones where causality flowed backward and space-time exhibited properties that violated basic physics. These scars would fade over geological time, but they would serve as a warning to any species that might consider following the Kethmori's path. Through his expanded consciousness, Volkov detected something unexpected, a transmission from the ruins of Zirion 7. The signal was weak, barely distinguishable from background radiation, but it carried the quantum signature of human communication protocols. Someone had survived the harvest. His attention focused on the planet's surface, where his enhanced perception revealed the impossible truth. Deep beneath Zirion 7's northern continent, a group of 300 survivors huddled in a military bunker that had been shielded with exotic matter barriers. They were researchers and engineers from the planet's defense laboratories, personnel who had been working on countermeasures to biological warfare when the Kethmori attack began. Among them was Dr. Elena Vasquez, the xenobiologist who had first identified the Kethmori threat pattern. She was alive, injured but functional, and she was trying to contact any surviving Terran Defense Force units through an quantum-encrypted channel that piggybacked on the dark matter network. Volkov's distributed consciousness touched the communication system, his presence manifesting as a familiar voice through the bunker's speakers. Dr. Vasquez, this is Commander Marcus Volkov of the TDF vessel Vindictive. You are not alone. The response came through tears of relief and disbelief. Commander? The report said the entire 7th Fleet was destroyed. How are you still alive? I'm not, Volkov replied, his voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate from the walls themselves. Not in any sense that matters. But I'm still here, still watching, still protecting what remains of humanity in this sector. Through the bunker's external sensors, Vasquez and her team could see the devastation above ground. The Kethmori had strip-mined entire continents, leaving behind empty canyons where cities had once stood. The oceans had been drained, their biomass converted into raw materials for the alien fleet. Even the atmosphere had been partially processed, its oxygen content reduced to levels that could barely support human life. But the survivors possessed something invaluable, complete genetic records of Zirion 7's population, stored in quantum-encrypted databases that the Kethmori had been unable to access. 4 billion people lived on in digital form, their DNA patterns preserved along with comprehensive psychological profiles and cultural archives. Given enough time and resources, the entire population could be reconstructed through advanced cloning techniques. The HFY didn't just take lives, Vasquez explained, her voice carrying the weight of cosmic grief. They took the potential for those lives to continue. But we saved what we could. The genetic archives are intact, protected by quantum encryption that would take billions of years to crack. Volkov's consciousness expanded through the bunker systems, analyzing the stored data with processing power that spanned multiple star systems. The archives were indeed complete, not just genetic templates but entire personality matrices that could be downloaded into cloned bodies. It was a form of resurrection that bordered on the miraculous, but it would require resources that the survivors did not possess. "I can help," Volkov said, his voice now emanating from multiple speakers throughout the facility. "The array has given me access to manufacturing capabilities that exist outside normal spacetime. I can create the necessary equipment, but it will take time, decades, possibly centuries." The implications were staggering. Zirion 7's population could be restored, but only through a process that would fundamentally change what it meant to be human. The reconstructed individuals would be perfect copies of the originals, but they would be born into a universe that had moved beyond conventional physics. They would be the children of a cosmic weapon, raised in the shadow of technologies that could reshape reality itself. "There's something else," Vasquez continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The archives contain more than just human genetic data. During the final hours of the attack, our quantum collectors managed to capture some of the HFY biopatterns. We have samples of their collective consciousness, not complete entities but fragments that could be studied, analyzed, perhaps even interrogated." Volkov's distributed awareness reacted to this information with something that might have been satisfaction, if he had retained the capacity for such emotions. The genetic fragments would provide invaluable intelligence about the HFY's evolutionary strategies, their technological capabilities, and most importantly, their psychological weaknesses. The next encounter with the collective would be fought with knowledge rather than just exotic weapons. "Begin the preservation protocols," he ordered, his consciousness already reaching out through the dark matter network to begin constructing the necessary facilities. "I'll establish manufacturing nodes throughout the system, automated systems that can produce the equipment needed for large-scale genetic reconstruction. It will take time, but we have nothing but time." As the survivors began their work, Volkov's awareness expanded beyond the Zirion system to monitor the broader galaxy. The battle had sent ripples through spacetime that would be detectable by any civilization with sufficiently advanced sensors. Some would interpret the gravitational anomalies as natural phenomena, the collision of neutron stars or the collapse of exotic matter. Others would recognize the signatures of cosmic-scale warfare and begin preparing their own defenses. Humanity's secret was out. The galaxy now knew that the species from the small blue world had developed weapons that could reach across stellar distances to touch the fundamental forces of reality. Some civilizations would seek alliance with such a powerful species. Others would begin developing countermeasures, fearing that humanity might eventually turn its cosmic weapons against them. But the most important audience for the battle's message was not yet aware of what had transpired. Deep in the galactic core, the HFY's true masters, the entities that had created the collective as a harvesting tool, monitored the cosmic background radiation for signs of resistance to their expansion. They had noticed the gravitational anomalies, the exotic particle signatures, the temporary disruptions in the fundamental constants. They were beginning to take notice of humanity. Volkov's consciousness settled into its new role as guardian of the Zirion system and its precious genetic archives. He was no longer human, no longer individual, but he retained enough of his original purpose to understand the stakes. The battle had been won, but the war was just beginning. The galaxy contained threats that made the HFY collective look like a minor inconvenience. Ancient intelligence that had been consuming stars since before the first organic life crawled out of primordial seas. But humanity now possessed weapons that could fight such entities on equal terms. The array had proven that cosmic-scale warfare was possible, that the fundamental forces of reality could be turned into instruments of destruction. The next time humanity faced extinction, they would not fight alone. They would fight with the combined knowledge of every species that had ever refused to surrender to the dark. In the depths of space, the Vindictive drifted silent and empty, her hull scarred by battles that had transcended the normal understanding of warfare. But her weapons remained active, powered by forces that existed outside the conventional laws of physics. The ship had become a shrine to humanity's refusal to accept defeat, a monument to the idea that even gods could be killed if the price was acceptable. And in the quantum foam between stars, Marcus Volkov's consciousness continued its eternal watch, no longer human but still carrying the spark of defiance that had driven him to activate the Lazarus Protocol. He had become something beyond individual existence. A weapon that thought, a guardian that spanned galaxies, a promise that humanity would never again face extinction alone. The universe had learned to fear the species that could turn their own souls into ammunition. And in the depths of space, other ancient intelligences were beginning to pay attention to the small blue world that had dared to challenge the cosmic order. The real war was about to begin, and humanity would face it with weapons that could unmake reality itself. The silence between stars carried a new message now, not the empty quiet of vacuum, but the patient stillness of a loaded gun, waiting for the next target to present itself. In the end, that was humanity's greatest weapon, not the exotic technologies or the cosmic scale arrays, but the absolute refusal to surrender, even when surrender meant the preservation of what they had once been. They had chosen to become monsters rather than victims, and the galaxy would never be the same. The final transmission from the Xerian system carried a simple message, broadcast across all frequencies and quantum channels: humanity endures. We remember. We will return. It was both a promise and a threat, encoded in gravitational waves that would reach the edges of the observable universe. Every civilization that detected the signal would understand its meaning. The small blue world had produced a species that could weaponize the cosmos itself, and they were not interested in peaceful coexistence with those who would consume their children. The age of cosmic warfare had begun, and humanity had fired the first shot that would echo through eternity.